The other day, I received an email about a congregant who's facing serious surgery. A relative requested that I visit this temple member in the hospital. Normally, my response would be, "Of course, I'll be there." This time, though, I had to explain. During this pandemic, the hospital isn't permitting any visitors, not even family and clergy. Yes, I'd already been in frequent contact with the congregant who's going to undergo surgery. But typically I make a priority of being physically present. Intellectually, I knew that the right decision would be not to go to the hospital, and in fact that they wouldn't allow me. And still, I felt guilty. I'm hardly alone. Guilt feelings are magnified for family members who cannot visit their loved ones in hospitals or long-term care facilities. Others can't attend funerals of their nearest relatives. Adult children who live at a distance from their aging parents feel guilty because they cannot honor their parents as they normally would in a crisis. I've also heard expressions of guilt from healthy older people who are wisely letting others do tasks they would normally do for themselves. Yes, they're grateful that their children, friends, and neighbors are going to the grocery store and other errands for them. Yes, they know that these younger folks are happy to help. Yes, they know that they're behaving wisely. Still, they experience guilt. For many people, accepting help from others evokes unwelcome feelings of being a burden, even when the helpers would rather assist than not. I noticed this phenomenon when we publicized the opportunity to volunteer with the City of Little Rock and Clinton Foundation, which are providing over 7,000 meals a day to needy residents of our city. The city is seeking volunteers between ages 18 and 65. Several of our members in the old over 65 group contacted me. Why couldn't they volunteer? The temple didn't set the guidelines, of course. Still, I felt comfortable supporting them. Older people are more vulnerable to COVID-19. That made sense to our congregants who didn't argue. Still, I understood. People who are used to being volunteers, to making themselves available whenever the need is greatest in our community, feel guilty when they cannot help in a crisis. This week's Torah portion acknowledges that we may feel guilty when we cannot perform a mitzvah, a religious obligation, whether fasting on Yom Kippur or reaching out to care for those most in need. Now, this portion is not the one that one would normally turn to for help. It's all about skin afflictions. The disease is called Tzara'at, often translated as leprosy. However, since the illness described isn't actually leprosy, and we don't know what it was, I'm just going to call it by its Hebrew name, Tzara'at. A person thought to be suffering from Tzara'at would be examined by the priest. If the priest did in fact diagnose that illness, the afflicted person would have to remain outside the camp and would be unable to serve God as part of the Israelite community. When the person was healed, a detailed process would enable the previously ill person to re-enter the camp and serve God once again. As part of that procedure, the now healthy individual would bring a guilt offering, an animal sacrifice. Why, we may ask, would a person need to bring a guilt offering after having been ill? I have a theory. There's no way I came up with this theory on my own, but I can't find the source anywhere. The person with Tzara'at has been outside the camp and has therefore been forbidden to visit the sick in the community, to celebrate with couples getting married, to comfort mourners. In short, they have been prohibited from carrying out mitzvot that they are ordinarily commanded to perform. they may feel guilty, contemplating all the meals they did not deliver, all the hugs they did not offer, all the visits they did not make while quarantined. The guilt offering then gives the newly healed person a way to deal with all that guilt. The offering absolves them of their guilt for having failed to accomplish all the good deeds they were prohibited from doing while they were ill. So what might be our guilt offering? What can we bring, we who feel guilty for not visiting the sick or comforting mourners in person? For letting others get our groceries, or for venturing out to the grocery store when we know we shouldn't? Rabbi Lisa Grushkow, writing in the Musar Torah commentary, suggests that compassion, chesed, is in order. We may begin, she argues, by recognizing the kinship we all share, young and old, ill and healthy, vigorous and infirm. She cites the words of Susan Sontag. Illness is the night side of the line, a more onerous citizenship. Everyone who is born holds dual citizenship in the kingdom of the well and the kingdom of the sick. Although we prefer to use the good passport, sooner or later each of us is obliged, at least for a spell, to identify ourselves as citizens of that other place. In our present moment, many of us who typically reside on the well side of that line have been thrust on the other, even though we may still feel and be well. We should all strive to empathize with people on the other side of that invisible line that has become so stark and visible now. Each person who feels guilty because of inability to visit or shop or tend to friends and relatives right now is a person who performed all those good and noble deeds in the past. If one had never been such a compassionate person, one would not feel badly about being able to help others now. And yet, none of us is powerless. Even now, those who cannot visit the sick can call people who are isolated at home, combating loneliness. Even now, though many who cannot buy their own groceries can donate to help families who are suddenly thrust into poverty, with breadwinners having lost their jobs to the crisis. The compassionate deeds we are able to perform may be our guilt offerings. Another thought comes from my teacher, Ilana Stein-Hain. An Orthodox Jew, Dr. Hain, found herself pregnant on Yom Kippur. Her doctor advised her to drink throughout the day, prescribing exactly how much she had to drink and when. And her doctor was clear. Test results indicated that the fetus's life was in the balance. At first, Dr. Hain felt guilty. Never in her adult life had she taken a drop, a morsel by mouth on Yom Kippur. Eventually, though, she came to see that drinking water that Yom Kippur was more of a religious obligation, a greater mitzvah, than fasting. By drinking, she was giving life to future generations, countless descendants, who would fast on innumerable Yom Kippur days to follow, as would she. We will, God willing, sooner than later, get back to visiting the sick, comforting the mourners, and taking care of ourselves no matter our age, as long as we are healthy. Until then, let us find comfort in the compassion we are able to bestow. Let us assuage our guilt by reaching out to those whose needs are different from our own. And let us take comfort by staying safe we are keeping ourselves and others alive to perform countless mitzvot in the years